Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about Ben Riggs, the author of Slaying the Dragon, the Secret History of Dungeons and Dragons, which is a brand new book from. It's published by Macmillan. I think it's published by one of their little publisher presses, but at the top it's published by Macmillan, and it's a 2022 book, and it is. Ben Riggs telling you about the history of Dungeons and Dragons. But in this, he goes into Lorraine Williams, right? Now, this book is important, but also important is what Ben Riggs says about the book in a really critical interview between Ben Riggs and Sean Merwin over on Mastering Dungeons. So I'm going to be talking about what Ben Riggs said in that interview, which I think really kind of takes the mask off of his book and what he was really accomplishing in his book. The book is called Slaying the Dragon. And in my humble opinion, the dragon Ben Riggs went to slay was Lorraine Williams, right? And this is not new. This is not new. So this, in my humble opinion, I'll tell you right now, what's a kind way to say this? It is. I think Ben Riggs worked very hard on this book, and I think Ben Riggs worked very hard on this book, and I think there's a lot of interesting things in this book. But Ben Riggs, in my humble opinion, is a middle-aged privileged white male, and what's really important to understand is he's aware of that. And when he went to write this book with Lorraine Williams at the center of this book, right, he says some incredibly ungracious things about. Frankly, in my humble opinion, he very clearly attacks Lorraine Williams' legacy, and he is in a parade, a conga line of middle-aged, privileged white males who write books because they're galled by the fact that from 1986 to 1997, Dungeons and Dragons had a queen, a business titan queen named Lorraine Williams, and she crushed it. She put out the fires that Gary Gygax had placed on Dungeons and Dragons. She stabilized it, and she made it far more valuable than it ever was. Gary birthed it. Right, from 1974 to 1986, no one on this planet did more or was more effective in making Dungeons and Dragons a reality. And I'll tell you right now, I don't think I don't talk about Dave Arneson. He was an idea man. He flapped, he flapped his maw, right? And but the reality is, if it had been up to Dave Arneson, nothing would ever happened. Gary Gygax overcame every obstacle. He overcame the obstacle of actually capturing the ideas, organizing them, and writing them. I don't think Arneson ever put pen to paper, right? Like, it was all written down, typed by Gary Gygax, and then later, when the hard part came up, the money, Gary put up his own money, and he got other investors. Arneson did nothing when it came to the money, all right? To my knowledge, please correct me if I'm wrong. So basically, Gary birthed this thing, and from 1974 to 1986, Gary did everything possible to make Dungeons and Dragons huge. And then this is what really, I'm incredibly vexed about Ben Riggs' book. And the reason why is, I think in my humble opinion, Ben Riggs' book is a vicious assault on the legacy of Lorraine Williams, and it's ignorant, in my humble opinion, and it is cruel, in my humble opinion. And I think anyone who's studied the history of Dungeons and Dragons as closely as he has a responsibility, a duty, to shove their middle-aged white male privilege back and look at the entirety of what's happening, okay? And I think Ben Riggs failed to do that, and it is a prejudiced take on Lorraine Williams' history. And I can say this because he is aware of it. Listen to Merwin's. He said, I tried and I tried and I tried to get Lorraine Williams to talk to me, and she wouldn't. And then he tells us what he wanted to ask her, right? You know what he wanted to ask her? He's like, did anybody explain to you what was happening? She would not talk to him, right? She was right. He was ready, in my humble opinion, from day one. He had hatchets out and was ready for the worst possible hit job he could do on Lorraine Williams, because, in my humble opinion, he was galled that a woman was in charge of Dungeons & Dragons from 1986 to 1997. And Ben Riggs is in a long line of privileged, middle-aged, white males who have done the same spin on Lorraine Williams' history, right? And I'm going to tell you what, in my humble opinion, is the truth about Lorraine Williams. And I'm going to tell you what Ben Riggs won't, right? So here's the issue, right? And get this. Ben Riggs gathers the data, and I think he's smart enough to figure this out, but his prejudice wouldn't let him look at the truth, in my humble opinion, right? So here's where we land, right? So he said he breaks it down, right? And there, I'll kind of, he says a whole lot of things, but I'll summarize it to the crux of the matter, right? He says in 1997, right? Dungeons & Dragons gets sold to Peter Atkinson, who is the president of Wizards of the Coast. Peter Atkinson buys it, and he actually, Peter Atkinson gets ready to buy it. He does his due diligence, right? And he says, okay, I got the numbers. Last year, right now, Dungeons & Dragons is $30 million in debt. TSR, the company, right? I'm just going to say Dungeons & Dragons because it's simpler, okay? So Dungeons & Dragons is, and that's the only thing they had of value, the reality is. So Dungeons & Dragons is $30 million in debt, okay? But the revenue for the previous year, but the revenues, all the money taken in 1996 is $38 million, right? $30 million in debt, $38 million in revenue, right? And Ben Riggs holds this up as a sign saying, what a business fool she was, right? Like, trying to paint this idea that she let debt grow, right? And that she didn't do her job as a business person. And that, and that's why it was sold to Peter Atkinson. Now, this is an absolutely horrible misunderstanding of what actually happened. Here's what actually happened. There is a dragon that is slain in the history of Dungeons & Dragons while Lorraine Williams is ruling over Dungeons & Dragons. I'm going to tell it to you right now. It is video games, right? So video games come up, and they absolutely assault every book product. Dungeons & Dragons is a book product, okay? The heart of Dungeons & Dragons is the books, right? Even to this day, the heart of Dungeons & Dragons is the books. Now, that is changing. We are getting more digital product now. And I have to say, I have a growing respect for Dungeons & Dragons Beyond. I didn't previously. It's hard to understand Dungeons & Dragons, and when you see something first time, it's frightening, right? Just like Ben Riggs, in my humble opinion, is clearly frightened of Lorraine Williams' true legacy, okay? So she slayed the dragon of video games and made sure that thing was not able to put Dungeons & Dragons in the dirt like virtually every other book product, right? Borders Books is gone, right? And you will be hard pressed to find robust indie bookstores today, right? And so she made sure that Dungeons & Dragons continued to gain value from 1986 to 1997. And Lorraine Williams was not a business fool the way, in my humble opinion, Ben Riggs tries to paint her, just like the author of Mice and Men did the same thing, and multiple other, middle-aged privileged white males tried to, spin her time on Dungeons & Dragons. So here's what actually happens, right? So what really happens is she makes sure to defeat this, and trust and believe, the video industry was, claw tooth, claw bite, 2 wing attacks and a tail attack. That thing was very hard to hold off, and she did it by creating incredible settings like Spelljammer. Spelljammer belongs lock, stock, and barrel to Lorraine Williams, right? And she released other settings. She did Spellfire, she did Dragon Dice, she did a lot of innovation. And here's the kicker, right? She she was not a business fool. She was a business pioneer, right? And Lorraine Williams did in 1996 what every single business titan today does, and that is she knew debt did not matter. What mattered was if the product was strong, okay? And if the product was valuable and innovative and special and American, right, an element of Americana, then it would always be strong as a valuable intellectual property, and it would live well beyond. And she knew, right? She knew. Gary took it from 1974 and 1986 and had to let it go and had to let it move on, right? She took it from 1986 to 1997 and catapulted it to exactly the person who should have owned it at the time, which was Peter Atkinson. Let's talk about Peter Atkinson, right? Oh, and this is what Ben Riggs won't tell you about Lorraine Williams, right? And what he doesn't, and it's possible he didn't even understand it, right? Because I do think I'm ignorant of how to change the oil in my car. Ben Riggs is ignorant, right, of how an intellectual property is guardianed, right? And how the world works when it comes to debt for actual people who are good at business. Debt does not matter, okay? And the reason why is if you have an incredibly innovative, valuable product that many people want, that the best people want, that the smartest people want, you can always find another millionaire, billionaire schmuck to give you a loan to go to the next 3, 5, 10 years. That is how business titans do it today, right? Millionaires and billionaires, there's thousands of them, right? But you know what? There was only one Lorraine Williams and there was only one Gary Gygax. And these were the true champions of Dungeons & Dragons who guardianed it against absolute vicious assault every step of the way from the video game industry, right? And so he looks at $30 million of debt, right, and says she didn't know what she was doing. And he literally says in the interview, I wanted to ask her if somebody told her what was happening. Now, who would have told her, right? Do you know how few women were in tabletop role-playing games at the time? And Lorraine Williams is the first CEO of the largest tabletop role-playing game in the world. It made D&D the most progressive authority chain in all of tabletop role-playing games. Who would have told her, right? What Ben is actually saying, in my humble opinion, is like, did a man explain to you how to do business? Why didn't the men explain to you how to do business? That's what he's actually saying to Sean Merwin. And it is detestable and disgusting and repugnant, right? And frankly, I think that extends to his book. I think his book is detestable, repugnant, and disgusting. It is him walking in lockstep with a line of middle-aged white males, all who have come, in my humble opinion, to attack Lorraine Williams' actual legacy. And what her real legacy is she knew in 1996, she knew from 1986 all the way to 1997 what Jeff Bezos knew. Debt does not matter. They burn the biggest company. You know what's happening with Netflix right now? They burn billions. They are burning cash like crazy to build an empire, right? And every major company every major rock star baller company today burns debt like nuts, right? And the reason why is you can, if you have a great product, which is exactly what she like solidified in Dungeons & Dragons. It was tenuous, and Gary took it to the brink, and Lorraine Williams saved it. And Gary chose her to do it, handpicked her. But Ben Riggs doesn't talk about that. He doesn't talk about the fact that Lorraine Williams was Gary's chosen champion for the game, and it was the most progressive choice in all of tabletop role-playing game history. But you won't hear that from Ben Riggs. In addition to this, right, he won't tell you that she was literally 2 decades ahead of her time. She knew exactly what she was doing. And here's the kicker. Peter Atkinson desperately wanted to buy Dungeons and Dragons. Do you know why? Because that dude knew value. He found, right? He is responsible for the birth of Magic the Gathering, the most innovative, most profitable tabletop role-playing game product, the most profitable tabletop product, gaming product in history, right? Every single tabletop, every single tabletop game out there wants their model. They Peter Atkinson birthed an entire industry, CCGs, collectible card games, right? He was brilliant. He knew value. And the moment the millions started to stream in from Magic the Gathering, he went to her and said, I want Dungeons & Dragons, and tried multiple times to buy it, right? And the reason why, and when he came and he did his due diligence, he said, you made $38 million in revenue last year, and you have $30 million in debt. I will buy all of it, and I will buy your debt. And the reason why is and see, this is the part that Ben Riggs doesn't want to talk about, right? Dungeons & Dragons was super valuable. It was an element of Americana because Lorraine Williams made it an element of Americana. It had persisted, and it was life-changing for millions of people, right? Millions of people literally spent 10, 20, 30 hours a week playing Dungeons & Dragons by the millions, right? And the reality is that Gary birthed it, right? Lorraine protected it, and she guardianed it. And she did her job. And in my humble opinion, Ben Riggs' book, Slaying the Dragon, The Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons, is disgusting, repugnant, and absolutely is just a pile of his prejudices, in my humble opinion. And I honestly believe right now Ben Riggs owes a huge apology to Lorraine Williams, and he owes an apology to the Dungeons & Dragons community for continuing this white-mailed, privileged hobby of attacking Lorraine Williams' legacy. And it is repugnant, and it needs to stop. This echoing drumbeat of privileged, middle-aged white males coming to bring forward books that castigate, in my humble opinion, Lorraine Williams, absolutely needs to stop. And we need privileged white male and privileged people of color to come and write true histories and tell, and to tell the I don't want to use the word true, because he basically gathered his data, right? And I don't think he meant to, I don't think he simply could not overcome his own prejudices. But one of the reasons why I'm so vexed with him is he knew them. He talks about it in the Merwin interview. He knew he needed to talk to her. He didn't, and he still came right for her throat in the book, in my humble opinion. And it is incredibly frustrating, and we need somebody to write a history that is fair and equitable and tells what Lorraine Williams actually accomplished and does not try to mansplain to her what business was. And I feel terrible that she has to deal with these guys coming to her doorstep every 2 to 3 years. And God bless her for not talking to one of them, because they sure as heck don't have a place in their head to receive the truth, in my humble opinion. All that's my humble opinion. What's yours? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.